I'm reading a small book called Under the Jaguar Sun by Italo Calvino. Oaxaca is pronounced Oaxaca. Originally, the hotel where we were staying had been a convent of Santa Catalina. The first thing we noticed was a painting in a little room leading to the bar. The bar was called Los Novices. The painting was a large, dark canvas that portrayed a young nun and an old priest standing side by side, their hands slightly apart from their sides, almost touched. The figures were rather stiff for an 18th century picture. The painting had the somewhat crude grace characteristic of colonial art, but it conveyed a distressing sensation, like an ache of contained suffering. The lower part of the painting was filled by a long caption, written in cramped lines in an angular, italic hand, white on black. The words devotedly celebrated the life and death of the two characters who had been chaplain and abbess of the convent. She, of a noble birth, had entered it as a novice at the age of 18. The reason for their being painted together was the extraordinary love. This word in the pious Spanish prose appeared charged with ultra-terrestrial yearning that had bound the abbess and her confessor for 30 years. A love so great that when the priest came to die, the abbess, 20 years younger, in the space of a single day, fell ill and literally expired of love to join him in heaven. Olivia, whose Spanish is better than mine, helped me decipher the story, suggesting to me the translation of some obscure expressions, and these words proved to be the only ones we exchanged during and after the reading, as if we have found ourselves in the presence of a drama, or of a happiness that made any comment out of place. Something intimidated us, or rather frightened us, or more precisely, filled us with a kind of uneasiness. So I will try to describe what I felt. The sense of a lack, a consuming void. What Olivia was thinking, since she remained silent, I cannot guess. Then Olivia spoke. She said, I would like to eat chili in Nogada. And walking like somnambulists, not quite sure we were touching the ground, we headed for the dining room. In the best moments of a couple's life, it happens. I immediately reconstructed the train of Olivia's thoughts, with no need of further speech, because the same sequence of associations had unrolled in my mind, though in a more foggy, murky way. Without her, I would never have gained awareness of it. Our trip through Mexico had already lasted over a week. A few days earlier, in Tepoztlán, in a restaurant whose tables were set among the orange trees of another convent's cloister, we had savored dishes prepared according to the traditional recipes of the nuns. We had eaten tamal de elote, a fine semolina of sweet corn, That is with ground pork and very hot pepper, all steamed in a bit of a corn husk, and then chili and nogada, which were reddish brown, somewhat wrinkled little peppers, swimming in a walnut sauce, whose harshness and bitter aftertaste were drawn in a dreamy, sweetish surrender. After that, for us, the thought of nuns caught up the flavors of elaborate and bold cuisine, bent on making the flavors' highest notes vibrate, juxtaposing them in modulations, in chords, and especially in dissonances that would assert themselves as an incomparable experience, a point of no return, an absolute possession exercised on the receptivity of all the senses. The Mexican friend who had accompanied us on that excursion, Slosatino Valazoco by name, in answering Olivia's inquiries about these recipes of conventual gastronomy, lowered his voice as if confiding in delicate secrets to us. It was his way of speaking, or rather, one of his ways. The copious information Slostino supplied about the history and the customs and the nature of his country, his erudition was inexhaustible, was either stated emphatically, like a war proclamation, or slyly insinuated, as if it were charged with all sorts of implied meanings. Olivia remarked that such dishes involved hours and hours of work, and even before that, a long series of experiments and adjustments. Quote, "Did these nuns spend their whole day in the kitchen?" she asked, imagining entire lives devoted to the search for new blends of ingredients, new variations in the measurements, to alert and patient mixing, to the handing down of intricate, precise lore. Tenían su criada, Slusteno answered, meaning they had their servants. And he explained to us that when the daughters of noble families entered the convent, they brought their maids with them. Thus, to satisfy the venial whims of gluttony, the only cravings allowed them, the nuns could rely on a swarm of eager, tireless helpers. And as far as they themselves were concerned, they had only to conceive and compare and correct the recipes that expressed their fantasies confined within those walls, the fantasies, after all, of sophisticated women, bright and introverted and complex women who needed absolutes, whose reading told of asceticism and transfigurations, martyrs and tortures, women with conflicting cause in their blood, genealogies in which the descendants of the conquistadors mingled with those of Indian princesses or slaves, women with childhood recollections of the fruits and the fragrances of succulent vegetation, thick with ferments, though growing from those sun-baked plateaus. Nor should sacred architecture be overlooked. The background to the lives of those religious, it too was impelled by the same drive toward the extreme that led to the exacerbation of flavors amplified by the blaze of the most spicy chilies. Just as colonial Baroque set no limits on the profusion of ornament and display, in which God's presence was identified in a closely calculated delirium of brimming, excessive sensations. So the curing of the 100 or more native varieties of hot peppers carefully selected for each dish opened vistas of flaming as courtesy. At Topsolaton, we visited the church and the Jesuits had built in the 18th century for their seminary. And no sooner was it consecrated than they had to abandon it, as they were expelled from Mexico forever. A theater church, all gold and bright colors, a dancing and aerobatic baroque, crammed with swirling angles, garlands, panoplies of flowers, shells. Surely the Jesuits meant to compete with the splendor of the Aztecs, whose ruined temples and palaces, the royal palace of Quetzalcoatl, still stood to recall a rule imposed through the impressive effects of a grandeur transfiguring art. There was a challenge in the air. In this dry and thin air at the altitude of 2,000 meters, the ancient rivalry between the civilizations of America and Spain in the art of bewitching the senses with dazzling seductions. And from architecture, this rivalry extended to cuisine, where the two civilizations had merged, or perhaps where the conquered land had triumphed, strong in a condiment born from their very soil. Through the white hands of novices and the brown hands of lay sisters, the cuisine of the new Indo-Hispanic civilization had become also the field of battle between the aggressive ferocity of the ancient gods of the Mesa and the sinuous excess of the Baroque religion. Let me stop here.